Welcome, NBA fans, to a special trade deadline edition of the NBA Outlet, presented by OTGBasketball.com. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron. What's up, Kory?
Nothing much, Nick. Preparing for snow tomorrow, but enjoying the podcast for today.
Not a bad day to get snowed in tomorrow. Going to be plenty of trade rumors. Today is all trades. We're going to go through every team, talk about any rumor, potential deals that we've heard in the last few days. Before we get started, just a reminder, you can listen to NBA Outlet on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, Google Play, and OTGBasketball.com. But we're going to work through each division. We'll start with the Atlantic. We'll start with the Boston Celtics. This is a team that's been constantly involved in trade rumors for probably the last 5 years. Ever since they made that Nets trade where they got all those assets, all those first-round picks, they've been involved in everything. But this year, best record in the East. Kyrie Irving's been killing it. They just signed Greg Monroe to a disabled player exception for $5 million. There's some talk about them waiting on actually officially signing that deal to give them more flexibility for the trade deadline. Also, Marcus Smart has been a name that's been mentioned a lot. I believe on Matt Moore mentioned on a podcast that he believed Marcus Smart would not be a Celtic on Friday. Also, Tyreke Evans has been tied to there, Lou Williams. What are your thoughts on Boston? What's your initial thought of what they're going to do in this trade deadline?
Well, they're hungry, right? This is a team that thinks they can win it. They can win it all this year. By them being this aggressive, to me, it just shows that they have a lot of confidence in their defense and in Stevens. This isn't a team right now with Hayward out with a lot of big name players. Al Horford is the second best player. Not that that's bad, but it's just different. And I think they're hungry for it. And I think Marcus Smart will get traded. They want to try and get a first for Marcus Smart so then they can flip the first round draft pick for either Lou Will or Tyreke Evans. And if they got a ball handler and a guy like Tyreke Evans who's been playing phenomenal this year, I would take him over Lou Will only because defensively Lou Will is going to be a problem come playoff time. But Tyreke Evans, I think, would be a great fit if Boston could somehow steal him.
Yeah, definitely. I think Boston's in a really interesting spot. Like you mentioned, not having a ton of star players, Hayward being out, still having Tatum and Brown being so young. Like there's some talk about them not wanting to mess up future flexibility, and getting a guy like Lou Will or Tyreke on an expiring deal doesn't really do that. I think our Jonathan Ibrahim just put together a deal for the trade deadline marathon, sending Marcus Smart for Lou Will straight up. What are your thoughts on a deal like that?
I mean, offensively, it would help the Celtics because, as we know, Marcus Smart, great defender, but there's a lot of good defenders on that team. And offensively, he gets tunnel vision at times. He's just not consistent. He kind of reminds me of like a better version of Tony Allen from his days on the Celtics. Like he's that gritty defender, but offensively, he's just so, it's just so hard to get him involved. And Lou Williams, 23 points per game. You add that to the Celtics as a fire punch off the bench. It could happen. I'm just not a big fan of Lou Will in Boston. I'm not a big fan of the fit. But for an instant offense guy, there is not a better guy at this deadline than Lou Will.
Some of the things I've heard from Boston guys has been like, we bring in Lou Will and he can be Kyrie when Kyrie's not out there. So he could give them that instant offense. And we know what Brad Stevens can do hiding guys. Do the Clippers want to take a chance on Smart? Do they want to grow with him? It's, Tyreke or Lou. Also, the buyout market is something that Boston seems very interested in. They don't necessarily want to give up a first, so they might just keep an eye for that. Another name tied to Marcus Smart has been the Denver Nuggets. Could you see any deal coming along that way?
I know I saw this rumor yesterday, and I tweeted about it. I don't know why you'd go for Marcus Smart if you're Denver. I mean, who would you be giving up first off? Because Moutier isn't that good offensively. Jamal Murray has been very solid as of late. But Marcus Smart is an inconsistent defensive player, and I just don't think that's what the Nuggets need. If anything, they need a wing more than they need another guard.
Yeah. So, I think the Nuggets they need a true point guard, and I don't think Marcus Smart helps them with that. So, we'll see what happens with Boston. I expect them to be mentioned a lot. Do they make a trade? I don't know, but definitely I think they pick up somebody in the buyout market. Moving on to Toronto, this is another interesting team. They have an array of, young players on the bench, some guys that could possibly move, but it's been a pretty quiet trade deadline season for the Raptors. They've called about DeAndre, but have you heard anything big with Toronto?
No, I haven't heard. I know I heard some stuff about them wanting to get rid of Valanciunas, but there's just not a market really for Jonas. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if they make a smaller move. Maybe they call late about a guy like Joe Harris from the Nets. I could definitely see them wanting to add some more shooting, but there's nothing major coming from the Raptors, who pretty much for the last 3 years have been very big players at the trade deadline. I don't think they want to, shake the boat too much.
Yeah, I agree. I think they can make a smaller move. Joe Harris seems like a guy they could add some shooting. One of these guys that where they don't necessarily have to give up a ton. The only thing I've really heard with Toronto is they're trying to shop Norman Powell. Like he could be an interesting guy. He had some nice seasons. He's been in and out of the rotation with them. So it's weird. Like, do you think Toronto should take a big swing and just like go for a big fish and be like, you know what? Like the Cavs look vulnerable. The Celtics offense isn't amazing. We've quietly had a really good season. DeMar DeRozan is getting better. We've changed our offense. If we add another guy, could we actually just take a swing and actually make the NBA Finals this year?
I mean, you have to be thinking that, right? I don't know why you wouldn't be. You've competed with every other team in the East. Besides, you're clearly better than Cleveland at this point in time. And the only team better than you is Boston. And I don't think offensively Boston is better than Toronto, but Boston obviously is that defensive team, and they're more complete at this point in time. But I think the Raptors have a real chance. And if you could get, honestly, a guy like Tyreke Evans would be so good for the Raptors, because really what they lack is a true six-man, like a six-man that stands out on their roster is what's something they don't have. They have a great group of young guys who all contribute. Delon Wright's been fantastic. Fred VanVleet has been fantastic. All the big men, I can't say any of their last names. I'm not even going to try. But they've all played big minutes. Everybody's contributing. That's something the Raptors haven't had. It's normally been, Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan are going to carry us to the finish line. Everybody else, do what you can do. And this year it's been everybody.
Yeah, and I think they mentioned this on the Zach Lowe podcast with Woj is, it might be a better postseason for Kyle Lowry because it's not as much pressure on him. DeMar DeRozan's the guy, so many contributions for elsewhere. It's just like what moves. I think a lot of the thing is like what moves can the Raptors really make? They traded their first already to the Nets this year with DeMar Carroll salary dump. So they have to move Valanciunas if they're going to bring in another big contract or Ibaka. So I don't know. It's just like how many moves are there without really messing up their cap for the future? But Toronto's a team that I'd like to keep an eye on. Even when the buyout market comes, maybe they could scoop up a guy that could just help them. Right now, they're still, second best record in the East, and they could easily end up with the number one seed going to the playoffs. So a team that I'm watching for sure. Now on to the next Atlantic team, the Sixers. The Sixers have been busy. It seems like they've been mentioned in a lot of different trade rumors, Rodney Hood, Dwayne Devins, Tyreke Evans. They need another shooter. What do you think is going to happen in Philly? Are they going to make a splash and add another guy to try to increase their postseason chances?
Yeah. See, now the Sixers are a team I think would be perfect for Lou Williams. They could use a guy like him, because he can play a lot of minutes with the starters as well, alongside J.J. Redick with Ben Simmons and then Sargic and Embiid. Like, I think that would be a fun five to have on the floor. He would be instant offense for them off the bench, which they could desperately use. Because as you mentioned, like Jared Bayless has not been good for them. T.J. McConnell is very good and scrappy, but he's just not a very good offensive player. He doesn't have much of a jump shot. Lou Williams could be the guard that they're truly lacking on this roster, because J.J. Redick's a great shooter, but they don't have a true ball handler guard.
Yeah, I think Lou Will would help because, they could run that lineup like you mentioned before, running with the starters, and you have Ben Simmons running the point, so it doesn't matter. Then you have Lou Will kind of, control that second unit, give you that scoring, give you that splash, somebody who's been to the playoffs, an expiring deal too for the Sixers. So then they don't have to worry about possibly having to mess up their cap flexibility for the offseason. They want to take a swing at a LeBron or a Paul George or somebody along those lines. So I think the Sixers have a lot of options. I also believe they have an extra first-round pick. So they still have some assets, not as many as they once had. They have a shit ton of second-rounders, but they do have an extra first. So I think they make a move. They kind of push to lock them into the playoffs and give them a better chance in a series. I don't think they'll necessarily get to the second round this year, but they want to at least have a competitive first-round series where they're going 6 or 7 games with a good team. Moving on to my squad, the Brooklyn Nets. There's going to be another podcast out by the Brooklyn Buzz, another pod I host, all Nets trade deadline primer, but we'll talk about them a little bit. They have a couple guys that have been mentioned, a lot of rumors. Joe Harris, DeMar Carroll, Spencer Dinwiddie. What do these guys you think are moved? Do you think the Nets make another move? They actually made a small move yesterday, moved Zeller for Rashad Vaughn and a second-round pick.
Another draft pick. Nick, I like the Tyler Zeller move. Getting him for a young shooting guard and a second-round pick is perfect. Sean Marks has done a fantastic job for the Brooklyn Nets over this past year. Truly a great job. And I do think there's going to be another move. I'm not sure if it's Dinwiddie I do think Joe Harris, unfortunately, will get moved, although I do like him in the black and white. But, they've made Damari Carroll, too. I think Damari Carroll could be a guy who gets traded because he's really had a resurgence this year. And you can't tell me a team like the Miami Heat or even the Denver Nuggets could use a wing like him.
The
Guys who
Nuggets
are
have been
struggling
tied to him.
Have they been? Well, it makes sense. And even I know Portland's a little bit more strapped, but I think Damari Carroll will be an upgrade over Evan Turner, who offensively is just god awful for the Blazers.
Yeah.
But I definitely think the Nets are going to try to at least flip maybe a package deal of Carroll and Harris. They're going to try and get another draft pick, I think, though. I think that Sean Marks and the priority right now is to build through the draft, and they're looking for more picks.
Yeah, I just said on the Brooklyn Buzz trade deadline prod, I believe that there's an 80% chance the Nets make another pick. I think Damari's a guy, like you mentioned, the Joe Harris, Damari package. First rounders are a lot harder to come by right now. Teams are really holding on to them. So I think you'd have to package them, or you're going to have to take on another bad contract. Dinwiddie, I think the Nets won't move him unless they're getting some type of amazing offer. I don't think they want to give him up for a late first, at least at this time. In the offseason, it might change. A lot of teams are trying to gauge the value of their players, so they might listen to some calls and maybe move them in the offseason. But I don't think right now, unless they're getting some type of huge offer, they're really going to move Spencer.
What do you think the chances are that a guy like Alan Crabb, maybe they try to flip him, or is he going to be stuck with you guys?
I think his contract is untradeable. I don't think anybody would take it. If they did, that'd be a blessing. I would think the only way that they would take that contract would be if the Nets were getting some other type of salary dump back. So,
right, okay.
Another thing that's possible, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, the Knicks have called about him. The Nets are looking for, they asked for the Knicks first back, so probably a lottery pick or at least something in the teens for Rondé. So unless they're getting a good offer for Rondé, they're not going to move him. D'Angelo, Jared Allen, and Karis LeVert, all untouchable. I don't think anybody will call about them. So like you said, the Nets, I see them trying to grab another asset either by taking on a bad contract or packaging one of these guys for a nice first rounder. But they're not going to really make any splash moves. The only other thing I could see the Nets doing, like I mentioned on the other pod, is maybe making a move for somebody like a Stanley Johnson, a Justice Winslow, Patrick McCaw. Zach Lowe mentioned him. One of these guys, second rounders or first rounders that haven't worked out yet, they come to Brooklyn, have a chance to really explode their game.
I like what the Nets have done. I think of the two New York teams currently, I would take the Nets situation over the Knicks situation any day of the week. And it is directly connected to the job the front office has done over the past year with Brooklyn.
Yeah, you got to give Sean Marks a lot of credit. He's been making a ton of trades all over the place, picking up assets. He's really turned nothing into something. Like moving forward, I don't want to talk too much about the Nets, but having D'Angelo, Karis LeVert, and Jared Allen as your young core. If you said that to me 3 years ago, the Nets would have three guys that have potential all-star ability in them. I wouldn't probably believe you. So shout out to Sean Marks. But like you said, let's talk Knicks a little bit. A lot of interesting things with them. They could be a buyer or a seller. We're not really sure because we don't know what direction the front office is going. I mean, in my opinion, I think being a seller at this point makes sense. You try to move Courtney Lee. You try to move Kyle O'Quinn. Maybe even Lance Thomas, Willie Herman Gomez requested a trade. Get some more assets, build some young guys around Porzingis.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think you have to make a move if you're the Knicks. And I think, all right, for example, something that it blows my mind how Willie Herman Gomez has barely played at all this year after the rookie campaign he had just a year ago. There's just, what direction do the Knicks really want to take? Because if they truly believe that they can make, like a smaller move or a small move to get some kind of player to make the playoffs this year, like you're just fooling yourself. Like there's no point to play for an 8th spot currently with the roster you have. So like you said, a guy like Courtney Lee, there are a ton of contenders out there. The Thunder, even the Nuggets, the Blazers. There's a ton of teams who could use a wing like Courtney Lee, who first, it seems like every other year offensively he's extremely good.
Yeah.
And this is one of those years where he's extremely good offensively. So I would be very shocked to not see him move by the deadline. You already screwed yourself over with Joakim Noah, so you're gonna have to bite that bullet and eat it. I think Kyle O'Quinn will get moved. There's too many big men, too, in New York. I'm not sure why they're stashing all these centers. You might as well trade some because I think Kyle O'Quinn as a backup for a different team could be very good. We've seen some big games from Kyle O'Quinn as a Knick. And then Enes Kanter, for my own selfish purposes, I hope he gets traded. I know you mentioned Lance Thomas. Lance Thomas is just done. Another guy who in New York, funny enough, the Amon Shumpert 2.0 had very good seasons, and then after a knee injury, they never got the offense back. Amon Shumpert is very terrible at shooting, and Lance Thomas, in summer league games when he played with Hoodie Melo, looked good. In the NBA court, he's not looked very good.
Yeah, it's sad to see because Lance Thomas really did have a nice season. Then injuries have really hurt him. But I agree. I think Kyle Quinn is a nice guy. I think he's exactly what you're looking, for a bench big, and he can pass the ball a lot better than most bigs can. I think that's an underrated factor. The Warriors were tied to him. Joakim Noah, that contract is miserable. So unless they're attaching, like we mentioned on a previous pod, a first or Frank, they're not moving that. But in the smart world, the Knicks kind of move these guys and get some more assets. I know Porzingis has said he'd like to make the playoffs, but obviously the players are always going to say that. It'll be interesting if the Knicks care about what he said about that, or if they're just going to, get the assets and just be smart about it and build for the future. Because like you said, what happens? You make a trade, you get a good player, you get an 8 seed, you get swept in the first round, or you miss the playoffs and you lose out on a future asset. So, but
especially because if you want to actually get a player of talent, you're probably going to have to move like Frank. Like you're going to have to move one of these, right? And I don't know. I just think that would be it's like Phil Jackson mentality, that play. I'm hoping that it's Mills, right? That runs the show now in New York.
Mills and Scott Perry.
Right. I hope they're just a little bit smarter this time around.
Yeah, I agree. I think Perry has made some good decisions so far. So I wouldn't be surprised. Everybody was so mad about Tim Hardaway contract. I know he's in a cold stretch right now, but it's not looking quite as bad. But moving on to the next division, Central. I'm almost tempted not to start with them, but I feel like we have to, and that's the Cavs. I mean, we could literally probably have a Cavs trade deadline preview, and that pod could take 2 hours alone. There's just so many different avenues to this team. There's the Nets pick, the Cavs pick, Isaiah Thomas, Kevin Love could still get moved. They need multiple trades. They can move both picks. They can make a play for Kemba Walker. They could trade for a smaller guy. Like, there's so many different ways the Cavs could go. And on the Zach Lowe pod, they mentioned like the George Hill trade is still on the table. I think that's just like in their back pocket. It's like, all right, shit, we haven't got any good deals. Let's just go get George Hill. It's at least something. So what are your thoughts on the Cavs? Like initial thoughts of the Cavs trade deadline? Like if you had to sum it up into like one sentence.
Trades are coming. Like it's like winter is coming for Game of Thrones. Moves are coming. I'm telling you, Isaiah Thomas, Tristan Thompson, C.D. Osman, J.R. Smith, and last but not least, Amon Shumpert and Channing Frye. I don't think any of these guys will be a Cavalier coming next week. I'm telling you, there's going to be more than one deal, either 2 or 3 deals by the Cavaliers. And they might not be earth-shattering, all of them, but they're going to make a lot of moves. I don't think the Nets pick is going to be here come Friday. I think they're going to be trading that off. I think Isaiah Thomas and Jay Crowder, they were great last year for the Celtics. They just don't fit in on this roster. Crowder looks a little bit slower, but his deal is still very friendly. Isaiah Thomas kind of seems cancerous to this locker room. Not saying that he's a cancerous player overall, but this has just not been the place for Isaiah Thomas. Amon Shumpert, you're done. Channing Frye is an expiring you can package. C.D. Osman or Chetty Osman, he's been pretty good for a young rookie this season, so he probably adds a little bit of value to a team that wants a young wing. I just think you got to change it all if you're going to try and keep LeBron and actually compete for a ring this year.
Kind of like the first year in Cleveland when they made that big trade. They picked up Shumpert, they picked up J.R. Smith, they picked up Mozgov, they made a couple moves, got some guys in there, just changed everything around. Obviously, this is later in the season. It's going to take a big adjustment, but I think this is probably the right move. I've been going back and forth, but in theory, how many times do you have an opportunity to compete for a championship? Teams have not won championships in their existence. In this season, you have LeBron James. That automatically gives you a chance to go to the finals. Now, hypothetically, if you went there with this team, and even if, Golden State had gone down, maybe Klay Thompson gets hurt, Draymond Green gets hurt, Kevin Durant, or someone gets hurt, they still probably lose that series. And you could almost make the argument for the Rockets as well. If Chris Paul were to get hurt in that series and it was just James Harden, I might take the Rockets right now to beat the Cavs in the final series. So I think there's no chance with this roster you have. So if you want to take that final swing at a championship, like you said, Kory, you make the splash. You trade all the picks and you just say, I'm going all in on LeBron. Maybe we can do enough to convince him to stay. We bring in some new pieces, some fresh faces. Maybe the market's not that great. There was just talk about the late not pursuing him anymore and waiting to 2019. There isn't a ton of great options out there for him. So if they're able to kind of work some magic and bring in an array of different pieces and get some of the sour pieces out, maybe it's enough to convince LeBron to stay. Maybe it's enough to get the Cavs in a championship game, and maybe they'll face a banged up Golden State team and have a shot. Like, I think you have to take the swing. I think it's too easy. Usually this is kind of against what I say, but I think it's too easy to just not trade the pick and be like, oh, we'll build for the future. There's no guarantee you're going to build for the future. What happened last time LeBron left? You had all these number one picks and you couldn't do anything.
And if you do hold on to the pick and you say you're building for the future, LeBron will be gone if that's the case. Even though the reports are that he's probably gone or whatever, he'll look to go to Houston. I don't think he truly wants to leave Cleveland. If he can win in Cleveland, he will stay in Cleveland.
If they give him a reason to stay, he'll stay.
Precisely. But that's not building for the future. Building the future is not showing him, stay with us. To me, that would be them prepping for life after LeBron if they start going for young assets now. It's about win now pieces if you want to keep LeBron.
Yeah, and that's okay to do when you have a guy who's not the best player in the world. If it's not a top 15 player or, if it's just an average all-star guy, like hypothetically, I'm not trying to be mean. I throw plenty of shade at Isaiah Thomas, but say it's Isaiah Thomas and like he was in the MVP form last year that he was with the Celtics. And like you have the option to trade him because you don't want to pay him huge money in the offseason. You're like, I want to sit on my picks. I don't want to give this guy all the talent because I'm not sure if I want to keep him for the future. If LeBron says, hey, I want to stay in Cleveland, you're going to let him stay in Cleveland and do whatever it takes to let him stay in Cleveland because it makes your team relevant and you automatically have a shot at the finals. Like we were talking to somebody, I was talking to somebody at work about sports, and I was like, where they were talking about Tom Brady going to the championship game. And I was like, yeah, LeBron's been to the finals 8 straight times. And the person was like, they don't watch sports. They're like, so if you have this guy, you pretty much always go to the championship game. And that's essentially what it is for LeBron. Like, obviously he plays in the East, but LeBron's almost a ticket to the final. So why not just fully capitalize on it?
Yeah, the Eastern Conference is LeBron James' kingdom. He is the king of the East. He's been the king of the East pretty much since he came into the league, even though he had to go to the Celtics and they kicked his ass for a while. But he still got to the finals in 2007. So it's not like this has obviously been the greatest run of his career, but he had other opportunities and he's been there before. Yeah, as long as you have LeBron James on your team, Nick, 100% agree that you always have a chance to compete and win a title. Because even though I know I even tweeted one of the videos you posted, LeBron James in the background not playing defense. Like, he is a free safety defender, and he looks really bad on defense when there's not any good defenders around him. And I would like to think people around, like, NBA Twitter would understand that if everyone else is playing bad defense, even if you're playing, like, you're not going to look good on defense. It's just how it is. If 4 guys aren't playing good defense, you're probably not going to play good defense either. It's going to be a collection of effort and just playing off your teammates. Exactly. Why am I going to give 110% if Derrick Rose is getting beat off a backdoor cut? Like, there's just certain things that are going to irritate you to a point where you just don't play your best basketball on one end of the floor. And that's what it's been for LeBron James this year, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Talking about potential, actually, before I even get into the trades, let me ask you, I've obviously just advocated, like, take the swing, make the big hit, go all in. Even if they do go all in, can the Cavs beat the Warriors? Is there any scenario where they have a chance to beat the Warriors without injury?
No, I don't think so. No. But so the only thing I can say is I don't know if they get the right pieces, let's say, and they play through LeBron, and LeBron's playing fantastic, and everyone plays their role. They have a gritty defensive unit. I don't know. I would have to see how that team gels and how quickly they gel. You got to think, too, if they do a major roster overhaul at the trade deadline, this team isn't going to, like, come out of the deadline, like, hitting the ground running. There's probably going to be, like, a month of trying to gel together, if maybe not 2 months. So we might not even see, like, the best version of a new formed Cavs team until, like, early April, late March.
Which would be it would actually be a really great storyline. Like, they make all these moves and they struggle to the playoffs. Maybe they don't even get home court. They're like the 5th seed, and then all of a sudden the playoffs they just hit fire.
And then they get to the finals, and that's the best case scenario, right? And then, like, even if they lose, it's like, wow, what a season to get here.
Honestly, I think that might be Cavs' best case scenario, other than injuries to the Western Conference teams. They make all these moves, they get in the grind, they kind of surprise everybody in the playoffs. Everybody's already slept on them. By the time they get in the finals, they're that true underdog. LeBron can get his teammates behind that leadership wise. And it's like, they've said we had no shot. We're a 5th seed. We're about to make history. It would just be the greatest thing ever.
They beat the Raptors and Celtics in 7 games. Like, it takes 7 games for both series.
In like historical shots by LeBron, but we're daydreaming too much on this pod already. But I got to offer that I heard on the Zach Lowe pod. Kemba Walker and Nicholas Batum for the Nets pick, Isaiah Thomas and Tristan Thompson.
I'd take it. If you could even get Dwight Howard, I'd try and get Dwight Howard.
Maybe they throw in Shumpert and you take Dwight Howard. I don't know. I don't know if I want Dwight Howard. I don't know. I know he's been playing better this season, but I don't know if he's the type of guy I want around LeBron or that team.
Well, who's your center then?
I mean, you can make a move for another center. I'm not that concerned.
I don't know. I worry about who would become the center then. Like, who they would be able to get if you lose the Nets pick, Isaiah and Tristan Thompson in that deal, then you don't have money to even get like a DeAndre or anybody else.
Yeah, probably not a DeAndre, but I think they'd be able to maybe get like a Dwayne Dedmon or somebody if they wanted to trade their first and Cedi Osman or something like that. Like, I don't think centers are the hardest thing to come by, especially in the NBA now, because so many teams have guys that like, oh, we don't really want to pay him. Oh, he's really overpaid. We'll take his contract. Like, I think, and then also when you're playing Golden State, like, your center position just isn't that important. And Batum would give you one of these guys that can.
I'm sorry, Nick. Do you really want Batum? You think Batum would be good? You think Batum is a good move for the Cavs?
I don't think it's the worst move. I think Batum probably plays better if he goes to Cleveland. He's playing a smaller role. He's had some good games lately. I think he's like a switchable guy, and he's going to play better defense than probably what you have there already. And Kemba gives you that guy that he's not Kyrie, but he's a super light version of Kyrie where he can kind of just make offense by himself. I think this is one move, and then you have another move on the table that you can make too. Like, this is one move. Like, no move the Cavs make is only going to be one move that saves a franchise.
I agree.
It's a 2-move type of thing. So they make this move, then maybe they worry about center. But I think this wouldn't be the worst move because then they are getting Kemba. And then it's almost like the slightest bit of insurance because Kemba's still under contract. He's not, an amazing player, but he's still an all-star. And then you still have Kevin Love, so you're relatively relevant. You do have Nick Batum's contract, but at least it's better than nothing. So
at least I guess you have Walker, Batum, and Kevin Love for the future. That's your – and that's not a bad team. That could be a 7 or 8 team, like, without LeBron.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you get some other players or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if that's a trade though that entices LeBron enough. I'm just not a big Batum guy. I think he's well overpaid, and he's been better now. You're right. I have him in one of my fantasy leagues, and he's been better. But he's just there are games he'll drop 25. Like against the Pacers, he had like 33, and then I think the next night he had 4 points. And super hot and cold.
Yeah, I really worry about players like that, especially when the Cavs case. Every game for them is going to be a big game in the second half for the most part.
Do we think Kevin Love can still be moved? Like, there's been talk about him still potentially being moved, even though he's hurt. Like, a team can just get him. He'll be back later in the season, or they want him for the future.
I doubt it because I think, like, in pecking order of who gets traded, I think Kevin Love is farther protected, let's say, than like a Jay Crowder, J.R. Smith, Isaiah Thomas. I think all those guys are on the list to be traded before Kevin Love. I think a Kevin Love deal is if you're like really desperate. You can't get much offers for anybody else, so you have to go to your treasure chest and take out your prized possession for a trade.
Yeah. I think just the thing is, like, they've mentioned this on a lot of the NBA podcasts with, Woj, Lowe, Matt Moore. Like, a lot of guys have mentioned there's just not a ton of star players out there. There are so many big names traded in the offseason that I think it's a little bit drier in terms of big names at the trade deadline. Like, I don't really know, like, who's a guy that the Cavs, even if they wanted to make, like, a ridiculous offer somebody, like, who's out there to even get for a ridiculous offer? Like, Aaron Gordon? Like, that's probably that's one guy. Like, would you do the Nets pick for Aaron Gordon?
No.
I know you're not a big Aaron Gordon
help.
guy.
Well, no, Aaron Gordon doesn't help you when – what does he add? When Kevin Love comes back, Aaron Gordon, Kevin Love on the same floor, like you're playing that small ball lineup again, but I don't think it's a productive one. Aaron Gordon is okay for the future, but he's not a piece that says to LeBron James, we're winning right now, or we're trying to win now. Because he's also one-dimensional.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think Aaron Gordon helps in terms of he brings athleticism. He brings, some energy to the team, another guy who can score, he can get buckets. Obviously, he's never even played with a player of, like almost all-star caliber, you could say. Like, there hasn't been a ton of great players in Orlando. So him playing with LeBron, I think is enticing. And then they have his rights restricted free agency. So he's a potential star player moving to the future. I think it depends a lot on how much you buy into Aaron Gordon, and also I think in Magic too, it's like, are we going to just trade another young guy that's like on the cusp of becoming a star player like a Victor Oladipo? Or are we just going to like, actually keep our guys and let them develop?
Well, let's
So I
say
think,
I'll say this though, Nick, if they do trade for like Aaron Gordon, I would want more than just Aaron Gordon back in return. Like I would want like a Jonathan Simmons or even an Elfrid Payton. I would want those defenders more than I would need the offense, if that makes sense.
I think Peyton is attainable. Even Simmons is a little bit harder to get, but he's on a good deal. I mean, I think they could probably work something out where they can make it work. I don't know how much Orlando's valuing Aaron Gordon. Maybe they'd want more. Maybe they'd want the Cavs pick too. I don't know. It's tough to say. Is there any guy in your opinion right now that you can think of that would be a guy that Cavs could trade for and he would, have a really positive impact on their chances against even the Eastern Conference teams and getting to the finals?
Wait, that's gettable or
Like attainable. Like it's attainable,
Okay,
but it's like it could be a little bit of a reach. Like it could be a guy like, yo, they're gonna throw the Nets pick, their pick, and then a future first to get this guy, but we think this team might actually take it. Or Isaiah Thomas, Kevin Love, whoever you want to throw in a deal that you think is, it could have a 20% chance of happening, but it still could happen possibly.
So it's a Clippers deal, and it's Avery Bradley, Lou Will, and DeAndre Jordan. Those three. If I could get those three in Cleveland,
Interesting.
I think that betters their chances. Not.
I
I'm
think
not
it
saying moves
definitely could.
neither a ton, but Avery Bradley is still a lockdown defender who, in let's say a finals matchup against the Warriors, is going to lock down to a degree Curry or Klay Thompson. And then Lou Williams is your instant offense, which you don't really have off the bench. And then DeAndre is just a better rim protector and a little bit faster of foot than Tristan Thompson.
Yeah, I think if that's the best move the Cavs probably can make, that they're probably still in trouble, like we've been saying. Because like it helps in certain areas, but then there's just certain areas where it's still like, athletically they're still not fast. Like Avery Bradley's a great defender, but it's not like he's, gonna be this great athlete that's gonna make plays all over the court. Shooting wise, they still have issues. Like Lou Will's obviously been a streaky scorer in terms of like he's hot and cold type of guy. He's having a great season, but like we mentioned, I think on a previous pod, after he's been traded, on the trade deadline terms, he hasn't been as good in the second half. And DeAndre, like everybody's like always pushing for DeAndre to the Cavs. The only thing I think with that is like, what do you do with DeAndre when you play Golden State? Like they were just abuse him. You know what I mean? Like I don't know what they do. So the Cavs are really in trouble. So maybe we were wrong. Maybe the smart pick is just say, you know what, we're gonna lose LeBron and keep our picks and just move forward. But I don't know. I really don't know what's gonna go on in Cleveland. It's tough to say. Part of me just thinks like you have LeBron, you make the swing. But give me a percentage chance that the Nets pick is moved on the deadline.
70 to 75%.
Okay. I'm going 50. Flip of a coin. Flip of a quarter right here, heads or tails. I'm not really sure. I think the front office is divided. I'm sure there's guys in there that have never won a championship or like they're new to the front office or they won the last time. They're like, we need to get back there. We haven't been there for so long. It's so hard to come by. And I think part of being a fan and just like, viewing sports and not being the person actually putting in the work, it's easier to be like in your head, like, oh, we'll get to another championship. When you get to a championship, like, I think you just need to embrace the moment and be like, all right, it's actually really hard to get here. So maybe I think they go for that full swing. But like I said, who knows? Milwaukee Bucks, like we mentioned, they made the trade with the Nets, picked up Tyler Zeller, a veteran big, nothing crazy. But I will say Zeller is a professional. He'll do what you ask. He's not going to do anything like, out of this world for you offensively or defensively, but a solid big man.
Yeah, he'll bring them something. I think the Zeller move also sets them up to now trade either John Henson or Thon Maker.
Yeah,
I think they're going to make another move. This is another team I think that DeAndre Jordan could land at. I wouldn't be surprised DeAndre. Maybe they do give up on Thon Maker and they trade Maker, or they package Henson with somebody else. I do think they're going to go after somebody, and they're going to move one of their big men.
I could see it. That's actually a very good point, Corey. Like picking up Zeller does give them some depth, and they can move a Henson. Athon Maker's a guy that he's been mentioned in trades. I've talked to people on Twitter. A lot of people view him differently. Some view him as a potential all-star in the future. I think Kevin Garnett even said something crazy that he'd be like an MVP type candidate. And then other people are like, I don't even think this guy's going to be a starter one day. So what are your thoughts on Thon? Like, where does he fall in your scale?
I mean, there's glimpses of him where he looks like he could be like a Miles Turner in comparison. He's very lanky. He's good around the rim. He has a very decent mid-range jump shot who can stretch out to the three-point line if he practices and tries more. But it's the size and the stamina, the athletic ability that are his only issues right now. He's got to get bigger. He's frail. He's just not big. And that for a guy his size, putting on weight is not the easiest thing. We saw Giannis. It took Giannis 3 years to finally get some really good size to him.
Now he's a monster, though.
Right
Giannis
now,
is a monster.
He's a monster. But it took time. And Porzingis is another guy in this league who needs to put on size, and it's not that easy when you're that size. It takes years at times. But I think he is borderline all-star right now in potential.
I think
I don't know if
guys
he is an all-star ever, but borderline.
When people think of young guys, like they forget. Like some of these dudes are really like not fully men yet. So they need to hit like that grown men stage. As you can see, as my voice cracks, that's ironic as hell. But get that grown man stage where your muscle starts to just stay on. It's a little bit easier to hold weight. So that's something with Thon. I like his potential, but I also could see the Bucks being like, we have a nice young core. We have to entice Giannis to want to stay. We need to start doing something in the playoffs. We already swung on Eric Bledsoe. Why not try to bring in another big name? A lot of talk with DeAndre, and I think I saw this. David Aldridge tweeted this out. A lot of the teams are looking for DeAndre to opt in, want him to opt in for the next year, like knowing that we're not just trading for an expiring guy. So, I mean, maybe the Bucks are wanting him to opt in. They could make the deal. They can move some young guys. They can move some picks. So they got Eric Bledsoe for nothing, and that really helped them out. And DeAndre and Eric Bledsoe are close. So that's another push for that deal. Anybody else on the Bucks you see potential moving for, making a trade for?
I'm sitting here and I'm trying to think if they do trade Jabari, but I just don't think they do. I wouldn't trade Jabari Parker. I keep him for the future. I don't. It's impossible to get down.
Yeah, it's impossible to get value for Jabari. Sorry to cut you off, but because of the injury coming back such a short period of time, like nobody's going to give you what you want for him, and like you don't even know if that's what he's worth until he plays more. And then the offseason and the restricted free agency, that team has to pay him big bucks. So he's just a guy that's like impossible to gauge right now.
Right, I agree. I personally think Jabari Parker has a ton of upside if he can stay healthy. We've mentioned this both. Last season, before he went down, him and Giannis were extremely fun to watch.
He was throwing down on everybody.
Yes, and Middleton was just around the corner coming back, and as we know, he came back and he got hurt. I do think they made some kind of move, though, because they just got rid of Vaughn. Dellavedova just went down. Isn't Brogdon out for?
Yeah, Brogdon's out.
Right. So
quad.
All of a sudden, your second string guard is Jason Terry.
Yikes.
So now they're gonna have to make a move. Maybe they go after a guy like Shabazz Muhammad. Maybe they take a chance on a role player who struggled somewhere else, who's probably dirt cheap. Because I know there's not much room for error currently with their budget. But I definitely see some kind of move coming.
The buyout market, they might be able to entice a guard or somebody. That's a good point.
Tony Allen.
That's somebody. Brogdon going down, like that injury concerns me. Being a quad injury, I believe that's what messed with Kawhi. Not all of his injuries, but partially. And when you're a basketball player, you're pushing down on that quad, exploding off of that muscle, getting that 100%. It's not like Brogdon's a super explosive guy, but definitely could impact his game and to be more of a lingering thing. So a backup point guard could be more of a concern than initially anticipated. What do you think about a guy like Lou Will on that team? I'm just curious. I don't know if there's been any ties, but I'm just wondering what you think.
Offense. I mean, he could be a beautiful piece off that bench unit. And to your credit, how you mentioned with the Celtics, how Brad Stevens can hide guys on defense. I don't know if the Bucks can hide a guy like Lou Will, but they have a lot of length on their team. So their
defense is looking a lot better. since Jason Kidd's been gone.
Well, there you go. So if that's the case, if you can put who in the trees, he might not look that defensively, and who couldn't use, like we mentioned, a guy who is instant offense. Of course, he has struggled and he has gotten moved to teams at the deadline, but maybe it's just been a matter of fit. Going to Houston last year, it was Eric Gord's six-man team, and then you had two six-mans coming off the bench, and I'm sure it wasn't the easiest. And he said, Houston was an experience, but it didn't work out. It just wasn't what anyone thought it was going to be. So it's a matter of fit. I don't know who said that. I think it was Wade, or maybe Dwayne Wade. They said that it's all about a matter of fit in the NBA. You just
It is.
try
I
and
mean,
find
we've
your
seen
place
it
where you fit in.
with a lot of young players, a lot of guys. Like I could mention the Nets a million times, but you look at Spencer Dinwiddie, look at Joe Harris, two guys who are fringe NBA players. People are ready to put them in the G League. Now the Nets might get value for guys like that. So I think anytime fit coaching, relationships even important. Like hypothetically, say you have a bad first week with a coach after meeting him and you guys just don't see eye to eye the entire season. Like you're probably not going to have a good season. Say it's a coach like, for example, Jeremy Lin and Kenny Atkinson. I hate to keep bringing Nets examples, but I just know them so well. Jeremy's already known him. Him and Kenny have a great relationship from the past. So I think, automatically they know they're going to work better together just because they get along.
It matters. I agree. The personal relationships are a big thing.
It matters in everything too, and I think people kind of undervalue that in sports a little bit sometimes. They're like, oh, on paper, this works great. No, actually, egos and relationships matter. Like if this guy gets along with this guy, like people have brought up with the Wizards, like their unity might not necessarily be great. I think you brought it up on this pod before, and like that impacts them on the floor where you have teams like the Spurs, where you had Tony Parker, Ginobili, and Duncan, where they seem like they're brothers. Like you see them hugging and like kissing each other on the cheek. Like they're just like bros and they have a great time together and they've been together for so long. You can see it on the court and you can see it in their play. So relationships are important. But we're going to talk about a relationship for Kory real quick. Kory's Pacers are up next. So Kory, I'll let you take this over. Tell me everything Pacers trade land.
There isn't much. It's actually sad. Kind of. Not really, because like the direction, we thought they were going to win 32 games all year, and they already have 30 wins. So I really can't complain because it's fantastic. They're right there. They've been great. Victor Oladipo, stud. But Kevin Pritchard said in an interview, we don't want to shake the boat too much. We don't want to give up young assets for players to win now. We like what we got. So he's taking the approach of, I'm guessing they're going to attack. They're going to attack the draft with their mediocre mid-round pick, and they're going to try and get somebody in free agency. I do think though that they're just being sneaky to a degree. I think there is a move that they'll make, maybe a smaller move, because you also have to think all right, Glenn Robinson, for example, is coming back after the All-Star break, so that's not a trade. But that's adding a piece that you didn't have all year. And I don't think he wants to trade Bogdanovich for a wing, even though they should get a wing, because Glenn Robinson's right around the corner. And Glenn Robinson, without Paul George, is likely to be the starting small forward on this roster for the future. So I think ownership wants to give Glenn Robinson a chance to earn that position and maybe play well above he did last year before they go out and make a big move trade.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, I think the Pacers are in an interesting spot, like you said. I don't even think the Pacers anticipated being in this position, winning so many games, having guys step up so much. I wouldn't be completely surprised. We mentioned this before. Thaddeus Young was a guy that moved. Turner's been Sabonis has been great, and you want to get Turner more minutes. You want to play those guys a little bit more. Al Jefferson's not a guy you want to play a ton. Bogdanovich, he's just a weird guy. I could see a team wanting to take a chance on him just because he's like fool's gold. You look at Bogdanovich sometimes, you've known watching him for a full Pacer season. Some games he's great and he just looks like this guy that you need on your team with his scoring. And then other games you can see his confidence is just shaken. So he's another guy. Collison was a guy you mentioned to me about possibly getting traded, but now he's out with an injury. That kind of dampers that. What would you say
I think
the number one need of the Pacers? What is the number one need you say for the Pacers, at the deadline?
A shooting – Damari, and then somebody who can rebound. The Pacers are terrible on interior defense. It's a combination of the fact that Miles Turner gets foul trouble and is not a very good rebounder and very weak by strength purposes. Al Jefferson's a little bit slow, and Sabonis is just a little bit unpolished. He's very rounded. He protects the rim good, but he's again a 21-year-old who just isn't there as of right now. And then that's it. Shooting and rebounding and interior defense. Those three areas are the Pacers' weak spots at this moment.
And like you mentioned before, and I've seen in your pieces, the first round pick, probably they want to keep it. So it's like, what would you say is the chances the Pacers make a move, like percentage wise?
45. It's less than half, but I think there is a chance because when you're playing this well and you're above the ceiling, currently I think they're a 5 seed in the East. You're right there in the middle of the pack. You can possibly, if you go on a run, past a team like Cleveland or the Wizards, who have been struggling and don't have John Wall. I mean, obviously they've won 5 in a row without John Wall, but you have to think they'll come back down to earth a little bit without their best player. If not, good for them. But
yeah, definitely. I think that's what makes it weird for the Pacers too. Not only are they having such a great season, but they're also like right in the cusp of getting home court advantage in the playoffs. Like, it's not something we've ever thought about going to the season.
Yeah, and I think for the Pacers as an organization, and this may just be how my mind is working and seeing things a little bit petty, they would love to make it to the second round of the Eastern Conference Finals and say like OKC loses in the first round to like the Timberwolves or something, because it would be like a type of, oh, Paul George, look, we lost you and we still made it farther in the playoffs with that. I'm sure they don't think about that, but that's how my mind is rationalizing how petty the NBA could be.
I could see it. Like back in the day, the Nets and the Knicks, the Nets did this thing where there's still basketball in Brooklyn when the Nets were in the playoffs and the Knicks weren't. I could see the Pacers doing some type of marketing play like that, where there's like still basketball in Indiana, like on the T-shirts or something. So
yeah,
would you say this before we get off the Pacers? This Pacer team is better than last year's Pacer team?
Oh, head and shoulders better. They're well above they were last year, and it's 110% because there's no drama circulating what Paul George is going to do.
Relationships again.
There's no drama around. Are they going to re-sign Jeff Teague? Monte Ellis is not, and everyone plays with energy. There was a lot of team meetings last year where they had to address, not playing with enough effort, not wanting it hard enough.
Yeah.
This year, there has not been a Pacer game where I have not seen them compete for a full 48 minutes. They may not always win. I think right now they're tied for second in the most comebacks when down 15 points or more. They have 5. It's a team that has resilience, a team that is always fighting. One of their last games, they were down by 16, and they came back to win against the Orlando Magic. And at halftime, Victor Oladipo said, like, are we going to do what we've done all year, or are we going to roll over for the first time?
Yeah.
And they ended up coming back and winning the game.
I think the energy thing is that it's been apparent from the first game of the season. Obviously, the Pacers opened up against the Nets, and I was like, wow, this team is playing a lot harder than I envisioned, and just a ton of energy all over the court. Like, it's not like you don't see guys just like having those lapses where they're just like jogging or walking to a position. So, but moving on to another team, we don't want to give you a 2-hour pod. Pistons, obviously already made the huge trade with Blake Griffin. They've still been mentioning a good amount of trade rumors. Obviously they're looking for shooters. They're in win now mode. Rodney Hood's been a name tied to them. Pistons make another move?
I think they'll try to make another move. I don't think they will make another move. I don't know if they have enough pieces, unless they move like a guy like Stanley Johnson. But I kind of think they want to give this roster and wait for Reggie Jackson to come back a chance.
Yeah, I could see Stanley Johnson. He's a guy that I've hoped the Nets are eyeing because I think he has potential, and just things in Detroit just haven't really worked out great. But I agree. I think that they're going to be, definitely working the phones and looking for any addition they can for win now. This is another team that I think might be able to get somebody on the buyout market, possibly, some type of veteran, maybe a point guard if Reggie Jackson can't come back, but we'll see what happens with them. We're not going to give them a ton of time. You want to hear Pistons trade talk, listen to our Blake Griffin trade pod. Chicago Bulls. Interesting team. They've been, tied. They've had the Nicole Mirotic trade, already picked up a first-round pick. So for them, it's already been a successful season trade-wise. Moving Mirotic for a first-round pick, you told me that in the offseason, I probably would have laughed. But it's a great move from them. Another guy that could get moved from them, Robin Lopez. You see Robin getting moved?
No.
He's a guy. I got you. He's a guy for that Cavs trade where you were like, oh, Nick, who would be their center? That would be a guy you could trade for, and I think he'd be an easy guy to get. So there you go.
And I mean, he bring them some gritty toughness. Yeah.
And a cool hair,
I do think. Yeah, and no one gets technicals on the Cavs like Lopez does. I do think he gets traded, but I don't think it's like anything where you're going, oh wow, you know what I'm saying? It's one of those just, oh, he's going over there for a second round draft pick and cap considerations, or something small. But yeah, but like who knows if Milwaukee strikes out and they want like a defensive center. I don't think Robin Lopez would be terrible over in Milwaukee or a team like that, or maybe if. I don't think Washington would be the greatest fit, but Washington strikes out and they want to get rid of Gortat, and maybe the Bulls will take him or something. I don't know.
Oh, that's an interesting one. That is interesting because Robin Lopez is probably an underrated guy. Like if you recall last year in the Boston Bulls series, other than Rondo, Robin was a big reason they had a chance. You know what I mean? Like he was constantly in there in the boards, just dominating inside. So he's like more of an old school center, but like you said, he brings some gritty toughness. And I think he's a team that, maybe we don't get DeAndre, but we're looking for a solid center. We don't have one. Robin's a guy we can probably get for a low price. Maybe 2 second-round picks, maybe a guy, a young guy the Bulls want to take a flyer on. The Bulls have also been tied to Rodney Hood. Do you think they would make a swing for him? He's kind of like a little bit past their timeline because they have a lot of young guys, but I don't know. Maybe they're just trying to get another young wing.
I'm going to jump back for 1 second. They're trying to move Jerian Grant too, right? The point guard.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I've heard that too. They have a ton of point guards.
Even better, package Robin Lopez and Jerian Grant to the Wizards. You solve the backup point guard issue and you get a center. Just a thought. There's one right there.
Yeah, that is a thought. Or even like that's a low-key like small move for Cleveland. Like Jerian Grant's still like an athlete and plays some defense, but I don't know. Yeah. We'll see what happens with the
Rodney
Bulls.
Hood though. I don't think the Bulls will go after Rodney Hood. Zach LaVine has been fantastic. I think David Nwambo has kind of played himself into a consistent roster spot after playing for the Lakers last year. He's looked good for the Bulls. Chris Dunn, as we know, once he gets back, I'm really looking forward to seeing him and LaVine play more on the floor. Justin Holiday has been solid. I don't think they're going to add any guards or wings. If anything, they're going to look for a power forward, maybe next to Portland. They have Bulori, never mind. Maybe a center. But for now, they're going to
take a flyer on a young guy, just see what's ever. But shout out to Zach LaVine. I think he might have had my favorite dunk of the season last night, coming off a torn ACL. Like what? Like that's crazy. I wish I could jump like that, like with no torn ACLs at all. But moving on to the Southeast Division, the Washington Wizards. Kory just mentioned them. Obviously, they've been hot without John Wall. They don't have a ton of trade options. They don't have a ton of like big assets they can move. Oubre Jr., the first round pick, they want to get rid of Gortat. They want to get rid of Mahinmi, but nobody wants those contracts. What do we think with the Wizards? Are they going to try to make a move for Lou? Are they going to try to make a move for DeAndre? Do they have enough to do that? Because DeAndre's had a lot of teams chasing him, so his value is relatively high for the Clippers right now.
The one thing, I wouldn't make a move to win now if I was the Wizards. I think I talked about this in the last pod. I'd try and trade Porter Jr. or Oubre and try and move on for the future and try and get Gortat off the books as well. Because he's just – I saw him miss the layup last night against the Pacers the other night. Like a wide open layup. He just chunked it. It's one of those like when you were like playing at a pickup game and there's like the one kid you don't know how he plays.
The one kid that doesn't play basketball, he plays football, and he tries to play football like he's playing basketball.
He just throws the ball off the backboard extremely hard and makes a huge dong noise. Like, oh, God, dude. Like, just lay it in. You don't got to chuck it.
Yeah.
That's Gortat. But I think because of this winning streak without John Wall, they're going to think the irrational route, and they're going to end up trading some kind of picks along with someone, maybe even Oubre Jr. They're going to try and bring in talent to try and win now when John Wall comes back. But I just think everyone, too, in the East, I think even though Boston's number one, people still fear LeBron over Boston. So seeing the Celtics be number one overall, like the Wizards and the Raptors, they think the East is wide open. As if it was the Cavs number one, you're not going to say the East is wide open, if that makes any sense. This is still LeBron's conference. So because LeBron's not in that number one spot, every other team that's the top five is going to think they have a chance to win the East.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think you look at it and you're like, even the Cavs, you look at them, you're like, oh, they're vulnerable. And like I said, the Celtics offense isn't great. Toronto's had their issues. The Bucks are a young team. You're Washington, you're like, all right, John Wall's going to come back better than ever. His knees are going to feel great. Let's get him some pieces to play with, and the next thing you know, we could be in the finals. I think in the East, it's like, guys, I don't like if you're a team in the East, you're like, oh, guys, I like really don't know if we've had this type of opportunity. Like the Cavs have had rough stretches, but I don't know if they've ever looked this rough. So teams in the East could be like, I'm buying. I'm taking my swing. I've had to deal with LeBron for the last, 5, 8 years and, not getting to the playoffs, not getting to the championship game. Let's take our swing. Talking about
And
a
that's
team.
like you said, that's a win for like the Raptors, Wizards, Celtics, Pacers, Pistons. Conference finals appearance or a finals appearance for any of those teams is a win in
Yes.
all of their books. It doesn't even matter if you don't win it all because you're advancing farther than you have the previous year, which is improvement.
The only team out on that list that probably would want more than an Eastern Conference Finals appearance is the Celtics. They'd probably want a competitive series. Everybody else, I think, on that list would be happy with just getting there. Maybe Toronto would be like, we need to show them something. But other than Boston, Toronto, it's like, we get to the Eastern Conference Finals. That's great experience. Now LeBron's leaving next year. Who knows? We might be able to get to the finals. But talking about one of LeBron's previous teams, Miami Heat, no big deals on the table from what Zach Lowe said on this podcast. Not a ton of chatter, but they have a lot of contracts, a lot of interchangeable pieces they can move. Winslow's been a guy that was mentioned earlier in the year. Whiteside was mentioned, but people are saying there's not really anything on that front. Anything for you on the Heat?
Just that they're interested in a lot of wings, like Damari Carroll is the guy they're targeting. I know they've talked about possibly moving Goran Dragic, but I don't think they're going to do. He's just become kind of like the heart and soul of that, like average
All-Star Dragic.
Joe's Miami Heat team. It's like an average Joe Miami Heat team.
Like
no
Dodgeball the movie. Like that average
yeah,
Joe's team, though, specifically.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was talking about for the most part. There's a bunch of guys who they don't stand out on paper, but they do enough collectively to be a good team. And
Yep.
I think they'll look to do a smaller move. Maybe they go after a guy like Joe Harris because the one area they struggle in bad is 3-point shooting.
I heard
They
this
just have
stat
not been
yesterday
good.
for them. When Wayne Ellington doesn't hit a three, they don't win the game.
That's wild.
And that's Wayne Ellington. And no offense to him, he played on the Nets, great professional. He's a good guy. But that's crazy they rely on him so much. And you've seen games where they're running like a ton of off-ball screens for him. Like getting them some more shooting and some more offense probably would help.
I know last night they started off 0 for 9 before they hit their first three.
That's rough. That's rough to win in the NBA. I think they had a game against the Nets this year where they shot under 30%. And winning the NBA and shooting under 30% from three right now is a very hard task to do. Moving on to Charlotte, the Hornets, we've mentioned them already with the Cavs a little bit. Kemba's been mentioned. They're saying Jordan said he wanted a lot for him. We don't know how much of that's actually true. Obviously, he has say, but, they might make a different decision. That might have just been, a cover trying to get his value up. They do have the bad contracts of Nicholas Batum, Marvin Williams. They have Dwight on the books as well. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, they'd probably like to get off. So what they're looking for right now, I think they're willing to enter the rebuilding stage if somebody offers them a good enough deal. They're like, give us some cap relief and draft picks, and we'll just take the rebuild.
I don't know if they're really there. A part of me,
I would
that
be.
Jordan article comes out. I know the Jordan article was supposed to be. You can take it one of two ways. You can either take it as smoke screen, or that Jordan really thinks this team can actually win. They're just off to a really slow start. And I just have a tough time believing that Jordan would rebuild the team. I think he's just stubborn. I truly think Jordan, to a degree, when it comes to ownership in particular, is very stubborn with the group of guys he has. He seems to always hold on to guys a little bit farther than he should have. And I think he's going to keep this core intact unless he gets, like you said, that Cavs proposal, like some kind of deal where you're getting a really good draft pick and an all-star with heart, someone that Jordan can relate to. That's why I think he drafted Kemba. That's why he got MKG. That's why he got Nicholas Batum. He likes bringing in guys who have a lot of heart and desire and play with chips on their shoulders. That's just my personal opinion on the Hornets. So I don't know if they're going to make a move. I feel like they're not going to.
Yeah, it's tough to say. Like I could see what you're saying with Jordan and him not being willing to do it, but like anybody who's like really looking at the roster and realistically like expectations for that roster and that core, Like in my head, there's no way that court's ever higher than like a 6th seed or like a 5th seed. Like they're never going to get home court. They're never going to, be a dominant playoff team. Like the team's just not that good. And that's no offense to any of the players or anything. It could be fit or just the changing of the NBA. But I think you just take that swing and like whatever you want to make Jordan happy, you get Isaiah Thomas somehow. And I don't think he'll be hard to get. Even if you trade Kemba in another deal, I think you might have enough to entice the Cavs to get Isaiah Thomas. And if you want to bring in that so-called star during your rebuild, you have Isaiah Thomas. You just let him shoot 30 shots a game, put up a ton of points, fill in seats a little bit, and then just keep acquiring picks. I don't know. That's probably like Isaiah Thomas's best bet to get big money in the offseason if he was traded to some team like this who really wants to hold on to a star for relevance, and then they signed him to a big deal.
And they'd love him in Charlotte. I feel
that's what I think too. Yeah.
Like if he goes there and he starts averaging, like the 30 points per game, and they are like a 7 seed at best, the little guy will be enough to like, wow, at least we have the heart and soul of a team. You know what I'm saying? It'll be okay if they got a guy like Isaiah. I agree. That would be a good place for him to land.
It kind of makes like it would give the front office some flexibility in the sense of like, oh, Jordan, we got our all-star. We also picked up a nice pick. Like, and we're going to just kind of establish draft picks and kind of retool for Isaiah and let him do his thing. And then like, what are you stuck with Isaiah and Dwight Howard? Like, it's still enough to kind of attract fans, and it's like not a good team, but hey, they might squeeze into an 8 seed at some point if they get some like really good contributions from young guys somewhere across the line or whatever. But I don't know. Like the Hornets they seem to be like torn on what they want to do, but the answer to their question is really easy, but they don't want to, face the answer.
You know what would be hilarious? They trade Batum, right? And they get Isaiah Thomas and Jay Crowder. And then the offseason, they sign Avery Bradley. And they resurrect the Celtics, but in Charlotte.
Yeah, and that would be interesting. And imagine that. It's like, and then they try to like sign some like Celtics assistant coaches or something. But
yeah.
Hawks are another team we mentioned on the previous pod. Everybody seems to be available.
Fire sale.
They want picks. They don't really have a ton of like guys that they're like, oh, this is all-star potential. This is a guy we're going to build around. Like John Collins has been great. Prince has been great. Do we know if either of those guys are going to be all-stars? I'm not really sure. Can they definitely both be above average starters on like a good team? Yes, but I don't know if they have like that guy they want to build around. And reports from samamico.com or .net or whatever, not much interest on Bazemore Schroeder. There hasn't been a ton of guys. Not a lot of people want to take on Bazemore's contract. Like he's a solid player and he could help teams, but they don't want to take on that money for a guy like Baze.
We talked about, I know I've mentioned it a few times, it's a bad contract. It's too much for a guy who at best averages 13 points per game. I mean, he does do a little bit of everything. He gives like 5 to 6 rebounds, 4 to 5 assists.
He's sporadic.
1 or 2 steals. Yeah, I mean, he fills up a stat sheet when he has a good game. But the fact of the matter is, it's a lot of money to have a guy who will then put up those decent numbers and then put up, 4 points, 2 rebounds, like a very slow, limited stat line. And then for Dennis Schroeder, I've never been a huge fan of him. He's a little guy. I'm surprised that he doesn't have more interest than what you're saying, that not that many people are interested. So I think he could be a big part of a couple moves too.
Yeah, I think you just look at him and he's another guy that like Bazemore, sporadic, inconsistent. And, he's hot and cold. He's a guy that has his flaws. And I just don't know if anybody's want to take a chance on a guy like him because you don't really know, like, what is Schroeder? Is he like, is he going to get to an all-star level at point guard position? Is he going to get that much better? Where does he stand? So there's just a lot of questions. Dwayne Dedmon's a guy that I could see being moved. OKC has had interest. The Sixers have had interest, an array of different teams. But moving on to Orlando, similar, like you could argue in the Southeast Division, other than the Wizards, all in the Miami Heat, the Charlotte Hornets, the Atlanta Hawks, and the Orlando Magic, almost every player is available. Maybe for the Magic, like Isaac isn't available. Other than that, like, almost every player in this division is available except the Wizard squad, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, this is it's like becoming a thing on Twitter now. Everyone talks about how depressed Frank Vogel is and how sad he looks in Orlando. And it's because this roster, who started really hot out of the gate, is just not good. It's not very well constructed. And you can tie that back to last year when they let out that whiteboard where they had every single free agency target they were going to target.
Oh my God,
This
that was yucky. Like,
Yeah. It had Aaron Gordon's name on it. Like, should we resign with question marks?
like, oh my God.
One of the worst blunders. I can't believe someone really took a photo of that and posted it.
Relationships again, relationships again. Like
Yeah,
that doesn't help when you're putting my name on the board and I'm not that high. Like, come on, man.
yeah.
You're my coach. Like, you're
Frank
my.
Vogel. Yeah, Frank Vogel just like, oh, well, everybody knows I'm not really a big fan of Peyton and certain
Yeah.
guys in the roster. But I think this team could be one of the teams where you see big roster turnover, like not in a way not to compete, right?
Yeah.
Like some teams can make a lot of moves to compete. This would be like one of the few teams that sells almost everything.
It's like their rebuild on a rebuild on a rebuild. Like it's literally like their third rebuild. Like I honestly, Orlando is just like this. It's just been rough. And they've traded away so many good players before they've hit their stride, and they just have looked terrible with just Victor Oladipo and Tobias Harris alone.
But I don't think that's the trading purposes and then blowing up after. I think that's something to do with the player development in Orlando.
Yeah,
that's
it does.
not so much.
They changed coaching.
That's the real issue. Well, it's coaching, and I'm not even saying coaching. They just don't develop guys well. It's the weirdest thing to me how Victor Oladipo can get this good after the fact, and same thing with Tobias Harris. Those guys, I mean, they really blew up once they left Orlando.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it's coaching, some of it's atmosphere, culture, but also some of it is the guys just getting experience, and some guys you just got to be like, we're gonna sit on him. Like we've invested so much time in him already. Like let me just sit on him for 2 years. If I don't get him on the deal that I want, whatever. Like I think that they just kind of rush on guys, and like you said, also fits. There's a lot of bad fits. Like the whole Oladipo couldn't really shoot threes in his time in Orlando, and then they pair him with Alfred Payton at point guard who can't shoot at all. Like, how is that supposed to work? It's never gonna work. Like, and then you have Aaron Gordon who can't shoot threes at that time either. Like Vujicic wasn't shooting threes at the time either. So like, what are you doing? So I think there's just like a lot of questions there. But Orlando's probably a team that I would lock into making a trade on the deadline. I think they just have enough guys that they're willing to get rid of, and they have enough guys that have value to other teams.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think of the teams that need like smaller to medium pieces to make an impact, the Magic are probably the one team that has a piece for every team. You know what I'm saying? Like everyone
they
can
got a
use
point
Alfred
guard, a
Payton for
scorer.
defensively. Right.
Vujicic for the center because he's coming back soon. He's been mentioned, and they're probably not asking for a ton. Like, other than for Aaron Gordon, they probably just want like a late first or like some young guys. Like, they're not really going to be like, oh, give us a huge big time trade. Like, we have nothing to play for. We're trying to get rid of contracts, and we just want to build up assets because we really need to do this right.
Late Cavs pick with Channing Frye for, Alfred Payton maybe or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if a smaller moves made like that. So I do think guys who are defensively minded will be who the Cavs target.
I could see it. They also, you mentioned Simmons would be a guy that I think the Cavs would have great interest in. And he's a guy who's had success against Golden State. Also, and then the only thing with Frye is now that brings them back to another thing is they need to add a big because Kevin Love is out now. Who's that stretch big? So I think the Cavs, like we've said, is just multi-level trades are necessary and multiple pieces are necessary. But Kory, that wraps it up for the Eastern Conference. Great pod. We touched on every team for a little bit. And as always, you can listen to the NBA Outlet on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com. And we'll hit you with a Western Conference pod real soon.